All right, welcome to day 3. Apologies in advance for the room being so freaking hot again. I did just turn down the temperature, but we will see if that actually does anything. Sometimes I just wonder if they put that there to placate people. So hopefully it will cool down a little bit. Final reminder that headshots are optional tomorrow. Tomorrow will be an entirely different format. You will not be hearing from me. I actually won't even be here. So Caitlin will be running a mentor networking session. We have 12 different mentors who have signed up, 11 of which are alumni of the program, and one is a senior software developer. So tomorrow will be an opportunity to network. Things to be thinking about. You're going to be meeting with your mentor between 30 minutes once a week or 15 minutes every other week, right? So the requirement is that you reach out to them and schedule with them. Those will be mostly virtual meetings, but if you guys decide you want to meet in person, that's totally fine. And then what you will find is that there is a form in Canvas. So if you go to Canvas and over to modules, there is this mentor meeting report. And if you go ahead and pop that open, just like the attendance, right, your checkoff for your email, you'll put in your mentor's name. Your mentor will be assigned to you next week. You'll pick your name, the date of the meeting. Obviously, you are the student. How long was the meeting? And then this is kind of like a self-grading assessment, right? So this is just a chance to check in and say, hey, how am I doing in the program so far? I don't want you to think that if you put a 1 here that you are going to get kicked out of the program or that it's going to impact your grades. We review these form submissions every single week to see, hey, who's feeling like they're struggling a little bit, who needs extra support. And we'll kind of coordinate with your mentor as well and kind of figure out what's going on there. And then any notes about the meeting, if you have any, what you talked about, if there's something that got brought up that should be coming to my attention or Jason's attention. So a really quick thing to fill out. You'll have to fill it out every other week right after you meet with your mentor, and the mentor will also fill out this exact same form as well, so we get to kind of see how you guys are doing, right? So this is an accountability checkpoint with your mentor. And so again, tomorrow you will network with all of the mentors. You'll get to meet them. You'll fill out a form at the end of the session, kind of with any notes, and then we'll use all of the notes from the mentors, all of your notes. We will crunch all of those numbers together. That process is to be determined, but that's on us to figure out. And then early next week, we'll assign you a mentor, and all of the mentors will be contactable in Slack. So that will be the primary communication platform that you'll use to kind of touch base with them. So a couple things to think about between now and tomorrow's class is, hey, I'm going to be meeting all of these people, and almost all of them have gone through the program. And except for one who's a senior software developer, right? So what you guys want to start thinking about is, I'm going to have a couple minutes to talk to these people, and they may have some questions for me, but I want to have some questions ready for them, right? Just like you should never show up to a job interview without a couple questions that you've kind of practiced and thought through, and are genuinely curious about. The same goes for these mentors, right? That could be a question like, what do you wish you knew when you went through the program? Or what kind of mentor style do you have? Or right, you just start brainstorming a couple questions that you may have, because there are 12 mentors and you'll want to talk to all of them, right? So that you get the best mentor match for the course of the program. That mentor will stay with you over the course of the whole program. Unless there's some mismatch, right? Unless you start meeting with your mentor and you're like, we are really not a good fit, or I've been trying for a couple weeks, I can't reach out to them and I can't schedule, or there's some kind of conflict. That's totally fine. We can reassign you to another mentor. But the goal is that you stay with the mentor throughout the whole course of the program so that they can kind of see your progress. This is the first cohort we are running this program, so there are going to be bumps along the road. If you have any feedback, utilize that 30-second feedback form, also in Canvas right here. and let us know how it's going, how we can improve, and we will work through the logistics of all of that kind of stuff. So that is what is coming tomorrow, along with optional headshots. So you guys outnumber the mentors. So the goal will be to meet with all 12 of them. 3 of them will be virtual. Caitlin will give you more details of how you'll connect with them tomorrow night. Make sure you have your laptops with you. If you have a pair of headphones, bring them. I don't think they'll be required because we're going to set them up in the phone booths. But it's always a good idea if you're planning on being on a virtual call to have headphones and prevent any feedback. Make sure you can hear the person, all of that kind of good stuff. Oh, no, you're good. Biggest conference and it'll fit 30 people. And I'm like, how could you ever fit 30 people in this room? Okay. Any questions about the mentoring networking event tomorrow or headshots or anything like that? Yeah, so similar to that form where there's like a 1 through 5, you'll go through and score every mentor 1 through 5. The mentor will score every student on a 1 through 5, and then there will be a note section where you can be like, hey, I really connected with this person, or I thought this was really interesting. And then we will literally go through 20 times 12 of the submissions and figure out who kind of the best match is. And you may be someone who are like, I liked everyone, I gave everyone a 5, right? And then at that point, it's like, okay, well, you're going to get any mentor that's available, right? So be honest in your feedback. The feedback that you share on the mentor will not be shared with them, and the feedback that the mentor shares about you will also not be shared with you, right? So there is a privacy aspect there. It's just me and Caitlin who will have access to all of the form submissions, and then we will come up with some mastermind formula to actually match you guys all up based off of that. And if you want to, I'm going to set up the form. So if you want to, actually, let's do a raise of hands. Would you rather submit the feedback form after you meet each mentor, or would you rather submit it all after you've met everyone? So let's do a raise of hands. Would you rather submit it after you meet each mentor? 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, that's majority. All right, so I'll set up the form so that you'll submit it 20 times, or I'm sorry, 12 times basically. And so that way, as you're going, we'll make sure that you kind of can capture your feedback and then submit it. Okay, any other questions? Okay. So let's talk about Mac 101, because some of you guys have been using a Mac your entire life. Some of you guys have had a Mac now for 3 days and are like, I do not understand this computer. Let me just use Windows. We will make you hopefully feel a little bit better about Mac in the next 20-ish minutes or so. So Apple was the first to revolutionize multi-touch, and they brought all of that technology to their trackpad. Fun fact, your trackpad is actually a solid piece of glass and does not move at all. There are 4 tiny little vibration motors underneath it. So every time that you click and you feel that it's moving, it isn't actually, it's just vibrating to make it feel like you are clicking down on the trackpad. So if you have not figured out scrolling yet, you do not need to go over to the scroll bar, click it and drag it up and down. 2 fingers up and down to scroll on your trackpad, and that's the easy way to scroll. You do not need to be at the edge of the trackpad like you do on some Windows laptops. Scroll up and down with 2 fingers. If you are someone who finds that actually, I will ask this as a question. Does anyone think the scrolling direction is inverted? Do they feel that they are scrolling in the opposite direction? One person? Okay. So that will kind of date you of how long you've been a Mac user. About 10 years ago, Apple decided that it made more sense to scroll in the opposite direction, and they just changed it in one of the OS updates. drives me nuts. So if you were ever use my computer or I ever come to use your computer, I guarantee you I will scroll in the wrong direction the first time and then be like, no, it's the other way. So you can change that in system settings. It's a minor little nitpick. But the trackpad is glass, right? You don't need to whack at it. So you can, be a little light on your trackpad if you are finding that it is not as responsive as you would like. A lighter touch is usually better. Minimizing the dock, I apologize if this is common sense. Hopefully someone will get a light bulb moment out of some of this. But the dock is down at the bottom, right? Does anyone know the difference between closing and quitting an application? Sure.
If you close it, it just like goes away, but still running.
Yes.
Stuff like wherever you left it, it's still gonna be unchanged. But when you quit it, you shut the program down.
Absolutely. So let's say I'm in VS Code. Now on Windows, you would just come up to the top and hit that little close button, right? And you're like, all right, it's closed. I'm done. But not so on Windows, because if you go down to your dock, you see that gray dot that's underneath the VS Code logo, but it's not under the system preferences logo. That means that application is still running in the background. So if you want to think about it on your phone, right, when you double click the home button or go into the multitasking and you see all of the previous apps that have been open, the same goes for the Mac. Why does Apple do this? Why don't they just intelligently close it? Well, because for the same reason they don't on your phone, right? Who here swipes and closes all the apps on their phone? You are killing your battery life. Apple pleads with you not to do that. And Google and Android plead with you not to do that. So the reasoning behind that is, why do you not shut down your computer and just close the lid? Yeah.
It was power to start everything back up.
Exactly, right? Your computer turns on a lot quicker when you just close the lid, and when you open it back up, it's there and going. It takes way too much power, way too much time to boot that computer up. The same goes for all of your applications. So the operating system is way more efficient at managing its resources than you are as a human. And so when you leave those apps running in the background, the operating system can much more efficiently resume that app from memory instead of having to use CPU power to reboot that app, pull all of the resources, process all of the code, and then show you the application. If you don't believe me, Google it. Apple themselves have said, please, for the love of God, let us manage multitasking. You do not need to close the apps. The same goes on your Mac. On your Mac, you may have no windows of that application running, but it's still running in the background. And you know that because when you go down to your dock, you will see that little gray dot at the bottom. That means that application is running in the background. Now, there are times that we're like, but we're done with that app. We don't want it running in the background. We don't want to close it. We want to quit it. So when you quit it, it not only closes all of the windows, it will also remove it from running in the background. So to quit an application, the easiest way to do it is to hit Command Q. You will find that every keyboard shortcut, if you are a Windows user that you know with Control, is just remapped to Command, right? So it's going to be Command C, Command V instead of Control C and Control V. So when I hit Command Q, you will see VS Code is still down in my dock because I have it stored there. I use it frequently, but that does not have the gray dot running in it anymore. If you are also coming from Windows and you know Control-Alt-Delete as the way to get into Task Manager and to force, I forget what Windows calls it. There is the equivalent of that on the Mac. You can go up to Apple up at the top and then down to force quit, and that will show you all the applications that are running. Or if you're a keyboard shortcut person, it's Command, Option, and Escape, and that also brings up your force quit. You won't have to use force quit a lot over the course of the program, but sometimes you'll write like a loop that runs infinitely, and you're like, oh my God, my computer's going to explode. I need to stop this. Command, Option, Escape, or Apple force quit is the equivalent of the Control-Alt-Delete on your Windows computer. Okay. minimizing and the dock, you will see up at the top here that there is a little minimize button. Instead of that going down to your taskbar, that goes down to the right side of the dock. When you click on it, it opens it back up. Should be hopefully pretty self-explanatory. There is also virtual desktops, and Apple had this kind of figured out first, and then Windows really caught up with it, which is nice. But oftentimes when you are remote, you are going to have 15 different windows open, and it's going to be way too much to fit on one or even two monitors, right? And so there is a way to basically set up a virtual desktop that says, hey, all of the windows are going to be grouped over here, and I can basically swipe between them. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Take 3 fingers and swipe up on your trackpad. That will take you into a view called, it used to be called Mission Control. I forget what it is called now. Apple renamed it and I forgot. But that will basically expose all of your windows, right? That's spreading them all out. So I have windows on my second monitor. They showed me all of them. That can be a really quick way to go, all right, now I want to be over in Canvas. Now I want to see all of my monitor or all of my windows open. I swipe up, it shows me all of them, and I can click on the other one and get back. Anyone having any problems with that? Okay. Now for virtual desktops, it's that same 3-finger swipe up, but you will notice that there is now a plus over here. If you click on that plus, it is going to create a virtual desktop for you. I can now take this window and drag it into that desktop. So now my desktop 1 has my outline for the day, and I can take 3 fingers, and instead of swiping up and going up and clicking on it, I can take my 3 fingers and just swipe over. Now I am in that virtual desktop. I am able to put as many windows as I want in here. And if I'm looking for the other one, I can just swipe back. That's a quick way to have basically a group of windows without overloading you visually of all the different things that are running. Yes.
So what if somebody have like an external mouse and they want to do the little 3-finger thing?
Yeah, so there is a keyboard shortcut F3 that you can hit. I think it's F3. My laptop's a little older than yours. And that will also bring that same view in. And depending on what mouse you get, some mice have extra buttons that you can actually map to open that. So that's an option as well. Any mouse that is Windows compatible will be Mac compatible. Any keyboard that is Windows compatible will also be Mac compatible, with few exceptions. So if you're at Best Buy and you're like, oh, but this one's $20 more and it says Mac on it, that's just a scam. Every Mac, every mouse is cross compatible across operating systems at this point. I'm sure there are exceptions, but the vast majority of them are. If you are in the market for a mouse, I would recommend that you get a Bluetooth mouse because the Bluetooth mouse doesn't require the little receiver, dongle, plug-in, whatever you want to call it. And a lot of those receivers are still USB-A and everything on your Mac is USB-C. So now you have to have this ugly thing hanging out of your computer. If you get a Bluetooth mouse, you can connect that directly to the computer without needing the little receiver. Okay. Now for the absolute bane of my existence, full screen mode on the Mac. This is one thing that Windows has gotten right, and I cannot stand that they do this. So just like we have the close button, and that works the way we think it will, and we have the minus button, and that works and minimizes, okay, that works the way we think it is. Now on Windows, the maximize button, what does that do? It just makes the window the full size of your screen, right? Well, in Mac, it says, screw you, I'm making a virtual desktop for you. And I'm like, but I don't want a virtual desktop. I would just like this window to be the full size of my monitor so I can have other windows open and know where it is. And Mac says, nope, we're putting it in a different full screen mode. So when I click on this, it does put me in full screen, but now I'm like, okay, where are my other windows? Well, I can swipe up and now I can see Google Chrome has now become kind of its own virtual desktop. But what if I'm in here and I'm like, okay, I just want to shrink this window down a little bit. Can't do it. Now I'm like, okay, well, what if I want to go see my other window? What if I want another window next to this one? Or I can swipe up and I can go to desktop 2, but I can't drag this one on to this one. I can do a split screen with it. And if I do a split screen with it by dropping it there, now I'm locked into only 2. So if I want to do a third one, I can't. I really hate this. Some people love full screen mode on your Mac. And if you use it and you're comfortable with it, by all means, continue to use it. But Windows was kind of a revolutionary idea 45 years ago. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Someone at Apple thought full screen was better than Windows, and we ended up with this mode. So if you use it, I'm not going to bash you. I use virtual desktops all the time. I think they're great. I don't use full screen mode on the Mac. What I prefer to do, because I can't even figure out how to get out of full screen. No, you can.
Oh, press play.
Yeah. Okay. So if I get these two back in the same desktop, of course you can grab the window and shrink it, right? And you can grab this one and move it around. But Windows does this lovely thing called snapping that I think is incredibly dumb that Apple does not support right out of the box. I can grab this window and just drag it over to the right side of my screen, and it takes up half the screen. And I can grab this window and drag it to this half of the screen and let go. And now I have 2 perfectly sized windows. Why doesn't that happen natively? I have no idea. The good news is if you would like this functionality, it is totally free. If you go to Google and do a search for the rectangle app, the first thing that comes up is rectangleapp.com. What?
You were just talking about the spreading of the word.
So if you go to download here, it is a free download. You go down to your downloads folder in your dock. You open this thing called a disk image. Do not, please, for the love of God, if you ever have a application that you are installing on your Mac, don't double click on it. Don't just say, oh, I have it downloaded, let me use it from here. Running an application from this disk image is going to make your Mac glitch in all different kinds of ways that you can never imagine. So if you ever see something where it's the application and it's got an arrow to the applications folder, it is saying, don't double click on me and start using me. Take me and drag me into applications. So if I let go of that, it's going to say it's already installed. But once you drop it there, you are now done with this disk image. There are like 3 different ways of installing apps on the Mac, and I don't know why we need all 3 of them, but here we are. Now, when you are, because you have it installed, you can hit the eject button from Finder, right? The file explorer, say, all right, I'm done with that disk image. Think about a disk image as like literally a virtual CD, right? That's the reason why it's still like that. And now that I have it installed, I can go to applications, scroll all the way down to rectangle, double click on it from my applications folder, not from that disk image, and then it will walk you through the installation steps. You do have to turn, I think, screen recording or something on in accessibility and privacy, so that it can know where your mouse is basically on the screen of where to snap it. But that functionality is so great because I can take any window, drag it to the left side of the screen, and it snaps there. Or I can grab that window, drag it all the way up to the top, and it will go full screen. Or I can even, the only word of caution I will have for you is when you do set up your second monitor, you'll go to get it on this side of the screen, and all of a sudden it's on my other monitor, which you guys can't see up there. So when you are getting to the edge of your monitor, sometimes you got to be a little bit slower and a little bit more deliberate with it. But that's only if you have your second monitor plugged in and you're trying to snap to the edge, basically between your 2 monitors. Yes. Oh, question? No. Yeah.
If you minimize it.
Yep.
Does it go back to like?
The same snap location.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, so if I have this snapped here, I can minimize, and then when I reopen, it brings it back to the right same spot. So I am a big fan of virtual desktops. I am a big fan of snapping. I just saw that they have Rectangle Pro. I use one called Better Snap Tool, which is like a couple dollars. I bought that before Rectangle was out, and I still use that. But Rectangle works great. It's how I prefer to manage my windows. And while all of this may be like, duh, Max, why are you teaching us this now? Because in a couple weeks, we're going to have so many windows open. You're going to be like, slow down, slow down. What window are you in? Right. And so leveraging either snapping with virtual desktops or mastering the full screen mode and being comfortable with doing split windows, that's totally fine. I promise I will not judge you. I am just not a big fan of the full screen mode, but that doesn't mean that you can't use it. Definitely, if that's what you're comfortable with, keep using it. But snapping is just another way to do window management. The last thing I think it does. Yeah, it does support quadrants. Yeah. And if you get into the menu for it, I think you can even do like 3 columns if you wanted to, or you can get really fancy with it. The last thing I will say is there is a newish, came out, I guess, about 2 years ago, feature of Mac OS called Stage Manager. And Stage Manager is this whole notion of, if you've ever done a play or been backstage, you know that they're kind of like groups of props and set pieces that have to go out on the stage. And so what Stage Manager lets you do is kind of group your applications together. I know a couple of students who have started off the cohort really liking that. I don't know of any students who have finished the cohort and are still using it. So if you try snapping and you're like, this isn't for me, and you try virtual desktops and you're like, this isn't for me, and you try full screen and you're like, this still isn't for me, Stage Manager may be another option that you can play around with. To get to that, you go Apple, System Settings, and then I have no idea where it actually is. So if you do a search for Stage Manager, it will come up and it will show you all of the different options here of how you can use Stage Manager to manage your windows. There are just so many different ways of doing it. Whatever is comfortable for you, that is totally fine. When you guys start sharing your screen, when we start debugging your code, you will always see a moment where my eyes just glaze over and I have to figure out which method you are using. But then as soon as I start finding all of your windows, it's totally fine. So whatever method you end up with is totally fine. It is not a requirement to use rectangle or full screen or virtual desktops or whatever. They are your computers, learn to use them the way that you want. But I just like to expose all the different options to you so you get a better feel of how to manage all those windows. I believe that was everything I had to cover for that. Any questions? Yes. The yellow one is going to minimize. The red one is going to close the window, but not necessarily quit the application. And then the green one is going to make it go into full screen mode. Yeah, so think about it as Windows has minus the box and the red one. The box is going to be the equivalent in rectangle of either grabbing the window and slamming it to the top of your monitor, or on the Mac, if you hit the green one, it's going to take you into full screen mode. The minus is going to be the equivalent on Windows of sending it down to the taskbar. And then how do you reopen that if it's down in the taskbar? You go down to the dock on the Mac, and it's always going to be over here on the right. And you can have multiple windows minimized as well. And then you're just going to click on it to bring it back up. And then the close is just like on Windows. It is going to close that window, but you could have other instances of that application running, right? So when we are in VS Code in Windows, I'm just going to pop open this group of code, and then I can go to a new window, just like we could do a new window in Chrome or whatever. Well, on Windows, if we went down to the dock, it would have 2 things that said VS Code, and one would be, the name of the folder that I'm working in, right? Well, on Mac, there is only one. There's one instance of that application running that has multiple windows. which is why the Mac can run on about half the RAM that Windows runs on, because the Mac is actually forcing the application developer to have one thing running and manage the windows themselves, instead of Windows, which literally goes, oh, you have two things open, you need two instances of that memory to manage all of that. So that's another reason that they went for kind of one application with multiple windows, where in Windows, or in Microsoft land, every window that you have open is another instance of the application, if that makes sense at all. And so that is why if you want to quit everything, if you're like, I'm done with VS Code, you don't want to just hit the X button on both those windows. You can either Command Q or go up to the top and down to quit, and that will close all of the windows and also close it so it's not running in the background. And when things get glitchy, right, like when you force quit apps on your phone, the same goes on the Mac, right? You want to not just close the windows, you want to quit the whole application. If it's still a little glitchy, you can go to force quit and see, if that will fix it. But that's kind of the whole idea of one application, multiple windows, instead of every window being its own application. Yes.
How do you adjust the screensaver?
Yeah, so that's going to be in system settings. If you don't have system settings in your dock, you can go to Apple and down to system settings. And then you will also notice, like if I pop this out of my dock, you'll see that system settings is now over, excuse me. Oh, that's a glitch. Okay, you'll now see system settings is over in kind of the middle section of my dock. And if I quit it, it goes away, or it will say there if it's a recent app. If you're like, no, I want that to be there all the time, that's something I'm going to use, you can grab it from this section of the dock and just drag it over to the left section of the dock. And now that will always stay there. It will stay kept in your dock. So anyway, system settings over on the right, you can just do a search for screensaver. And that will give you all the different options of screensavers. And it will also say, hey, you can go to lock screen settings to adjust other pieces of this. If you head over to lock screen settings, it will give you the drop downs for all of the times. Say, I don't want the screensaver to turn on, or I only want it to turn on if I'm not plugged in, or that kind of stuff. While we're in system settings, I am going to show you guys displays. This screen will look a little different when you have your monitors plugged in, right? And I will give you time at the end of class to kind of move out there. We may be doing that anyway, of dying after heat stroke, although I do think the temp is finally coming down in here. So this screen will look a little different. The system settings displays when you only have your Mac monitor. But when you plug in another screen, you will see that the BenQ is this TV that I'm on, right? And then I also have this ASM second monitor over here. But the first time you plug in your monitor, you may put your monitor above your laptop screen if you've got like a two-tier desk setup. You may decide that you want your monitor on the left. You may decide that you want your monitor on the right. That's totally personal preference, physical layout, all of that kind of stuff. But just like I can grab this window and drag it over to my other monitor, that may change based off of where you physically placed the monitor, right? I may have this monitor over to the left side of it. So what you're going to want to do is once you get home, you're going to want to click on this arrange button. And this arrange button is going to show you, this is my laptop screen, it's actually behind it. And then this is my portable monitor that I have set up. So I want to take this portable monitor, and if I had this monitor on this side, I'm going to grab it here and drag it over to this side. And now when I grab a window and drag it over to the left side, it will show up over on my monitor. So this is just the arrange button here is telling the computer, hey, where do you have this monitor? So when you click on it, you'll get a red box around whatever monitor you're trying to adjust. You'll want to position that relatively to where it's actually physically positioned. And that will make it so that when you drag a window over to the right, it will actually go over to that monitor instead of having to drag it over to the left and have it show up on the right. If that makes sense at all.
So it's also possible if you have your monitor on this side instead of this side.
Correct. And you can even have it so this monitor could be above it. Right. So if you've got like a monitor stand and you like having one monitor up here and then your laptop monitor down here, you can do that. So now that when you grab a window and drag it up, it will actually show up on the monitor above. So you can position the monitors wherever you want. But again, that's Apple, system settings, type in displays, click on displays, arrange, and then click on the monitor. You'll get a red box around the screen, and then you can drag that to wherever it is in relation to your laptop. And then again, to move a window over, it's as simple as grabbing it. And once it's arranged in the right spot, just literally dragging the mouse over as if it were all one big computer, all one big display, and that will take it over there. And that display will work just like your laptop, right? So keyboard's obviously the same. All of the snapping will work over there as well. Rectangle will work there. So you can snap windows to the left and right and to the left and right on your laptop monitor and have 4 things open. You can still mission control or whatever they call it now, Launchpad. Show all the windows that are open, and then whatever virtual desktops that you have on the second monitor are actually separate from all the virtual desktops that you have on this monitor. So you can set up different virtual spaces and be able to swipe between them. Out of curiosity, how many people have worked with an external monitor before this class? Oh, thank God. Okay. So hopefully none of this is new news to you. When we started doing this, we didn't even provide external monitors because our first cohort was all in person. And then the second one, we saw how many students really benefited from it. So we started buying them for the third cohort, but that was the beginning of COVID. And so a lot of people weren't working remotely, and they were like, yeah, I have one laptop that I work at work on, and that's it. So I apologize that this curriculum might be a little outdated, but hopefully there is a Mac 101 tip and trick in there that will be helpful or a good refresher for you guys. Okay, any questions on that? Okay. We are going to watch a video about Kanban or Kanban, depending on if you use the Japanese pronunciation or not, is a method of project management. Why do we do this on week 1? Well, because you guys are going to have so much to learn and so many different resources, homework assignments, YouTube videos that you want to rewatch, code that you want to review. It can get really overwhelming, right? Because there's so many different little things that you want to do. So project management is something that is not only really good for personal management, it's also something that is used in the workforce, right? Engineers are one of the most expensive resources that your company pays for on payroll. And so because of that, they want to effectively manage them as much as possible. And they turns out that engineers aren't really good at managing themselves and their time. All they want to do is be in their code and work on things, right? And so in the workforce, you do have project managers that will work alongside of you. A typical development team, and this really is widely varies across companies, but we'll have about 6 or 7 developers on it. That can be either all full stack or kind of split, 3 front end, 3 back end, maybe 1 database person. It will have a project lead or a team lead. That's going to be your direct manager, sometimes separate from your supervisor. It's going to have a quality assurance person on the team, right? The one who is reviewing your code and saying, no, it's not actually ready yet. There's this bug. And if I type in -1, it breaks here and that kind of stuff. And then there is a project manager. And oftentimes your project manager is going to be different than your team lead or your actual manager, right? The project manager isn't actually above you. They're not your supervisor. They're someone who is managing all the different pieces that it's going to take to get done on this project, and making sure that all roadblocks are clear, right? So if you have any questions, if we're waiting to hear back from another team, if we have to go contact the client, the project manager is the one staying on top of all of that. So that when business comes to you, the business team, and goes, well, what's going on with this project? You as an engineer don't need to individually report out everything you're doing because you're working closely with your project manager. So a typical engineering team may have about 10 people on it, 4 devs, team lead, QA, and a project manager, give or take a couple people, right? Some companies do a team size of 20, some do team sizes of 4, right? It all just depends. And in larger companies, you may have a smaller team of 4 people, but then that project manager is shared across like 3 or 4 different teams. So organization structure varies from company to company. But anyway, I'm going to play this intro to Kanban, which is a method of project management that is almost all engineering teams have moved over to this. There is an older style called waterfall that is now no longer used as much and is a bigger headache. So anyway, let me play this video. Okay, so any thoughts on Kanban? Yeah. So Kanban is not an app. However, there are hundreds of project management apps that use Kanban, and I'm going to show you Trello in a second that uses that principle. I'm sure there are also apps that are called Kanban, but it is more the concept than it is the specific app. Yeah.
So is it more like a to-do list in a way, or?
Yeah, so you can think about it as a to-do list. It's usually used in a team environment, although not always. I certainly have used Kanban for specific projects. And so let me show you Trello, because that actually might give you more context as to how we use it. So we use Trello at Hack Upstate. Oh, take me a minute. One of these days we'll have a lecture on password security as well.
Oh, well, also, where's the W from in the brain?
Oh, they're coming.
Coming?
Okay, so if we take a look at Trello here, and I'm not going to share my screen on the recording just in case I pull up anything that I probably accidentally shouldn't have been showing, but what we can do is, like, I'm going to go into, let's say, cohort 5 operations, because that one is mostly done. So at Hack Upstate, we've worked on figuring out what statuses work for us. So the biggest advice is start with the basics: to do, doing, done. Your to-do list is what you have to do, right? Well, why do I need doing if I've got a done list? Well, because oftentimes you'll be working on multiple things and you'll put one down and you'll go work on another thing, and then you'll forget about that other one, right? So the flow, that the basic flow is usually to do of, I'm going to come up with my to-do list, and that's a really great thing to do at the workplace. We call that a sprint planning session. But it's also a really good idea to say, all right, on Monday, every Monday morning, I'm going to sit down before I start working, and I'm going to think about all of the things that I need to either do this week or this 2-week period, right? And that's all a sprint is. A sprint is a set period of time, normally 2 weeks. It can be a little shorter, it can be a little longer, where we go, all right, we're going to commit to getting all of this work done in this sprint, in this time period. And so what you do is you say, all right, all of these things are going to go into my to-do list, right? And then as I start working on them, I'm going to move them into doing. So my manager doesn't need to come to me and say, what are you doing today? They can go into Trello or whatever project management tool that we're using that's using Kanban and say, oh, I can see what is in this person's doing list, right? From there, obviously, you move to done. Oftentimes we like to expand those 3 columns out to 5. The 5th column becomes roadblocked. Hey, I'm working on this thing. I'm waiting to hear back from someone. I'm stuck here. I need help with another developer. For whatever reason, I don't want to leave it in doing because I'm not really working on it. But at the same time, I want to make it clear that I can't keep moving forward on this. So that becomes a roadblock column. And then on the other side, in that first column, instead of starting with to do, oftentimes we have a bunch of tasks that we aren't ready to commit to, but we don't want to forget about either. And so that's what we call a backlog usually. And every software project management tool calls it something a little different. But the backlog is the notion of, I'm not actually saying we're going to get it done in this next 2-week period, but I also don't want to forget about it and I want to capture it somewhere so that next time we do sprint planning in 2 weeks from now, I can look at my backlog and go, oh, now I'm ready to do this task and move it over into the to-do column. You can see our columns are a little different in the Hack Upstate board, and this all kind of evolves naturally. So the way that we use Trello is totally different than a way another company may use Trello, which is kind of interesting. So you can see our Trello board here has all of our profile pictures on it. And so what I can do in Trello is go up to the filters and say, hey, I only want to see the cards assigned to me. Now that's going to narrow down the board and I'm only going to see the tasks that are required of mine, right? This is actually one that shouldn't be in approval. Approval meaning Jesse has said, yep, we're ready to do that task. Let's go ahead and do it. This should have already moved to in progress and then all the way down to done. So you can see we have a QA review, which is, hey, I think I'm done this, but I'd like someone to check my work. And then you can also see we have 2 different in progresses, right? And this is because when we at Hack Upstate, we work with so many different partners. Oftentimes we want to track the progress of a task, but say that we're not the ones currently actively working on this. So it would go into their cord, or if it's something that I'm currently working on, it goes into in progress. So Trello is really cool because it works. Think of it kind of like you have columns on a whiteboard and you just draw lines down, and then think about every task being a Post-it note. So you're going to put whatever that task is, modify homework assignments, right? You can go in Trello and assign whoever's responsible for that. Obviously, if you're the only person working on this project, you don't need to assign yourself to it. But you can see when we have all of these different team members working at Hack Upstate, this is how we keep track of who's responsible for this. And then we can even put due dates on this as well, right? So you can see some of the dates over here of, all right, this task needs to be done by this point. So we're going to put a due date on that. Trello is also really cool because we can put checklists into it. So you can see down here, we've got 2 different tasks that have to be done for this one particular card. So all different kinds of things you can do. You can even put labels on it. So you could say, all right, well, I've got all of these things, but I want to separate out my homework assignments from YouTube videos that I want to rewatch, from messages in Slack that I have to respond to. So you can kind of group your tasks based off of labels. We use a label system to kind of say, how far in advance does this have to get done? However, every board can be used a little differently. So Trello is one of those things that is almost flexible to a fault, where you kind of have to explore it and figure out how you want to use it. But the easiest way to get started is say, hey, I want to make a new board. I'm going to do my to-do, doing, and done. And then at the to-do list, all I'm going to do is start by adding a card, typing in what I have to do, and hit enter. And if I'm someone who runs on due dates, I can go in, open that up, and assign a due date. Or if I'm someone who prefers to have everything color coded, I can go in and decide what I want all of my labels to be and decide the color scheming for that. And if I'm a checklist person, I want to make the card of the general task that I need to do. And then I can come in, add a checklist, and start putting all of those items in and start checking those items off.
So what if somebody accidentally deleted a tab that you haven't done yet?
Yeah, so there is if you go up to the menu and then down to archived items, you can pull anything that you like accidentally archive there. And then when you delete, there's also like an undo button for that. But I think the interface encourages you to archive. And then if you really wanted to delete it, you have to go into the archive and delete it from the archive to make it fully go away. So this is a free piece of software. This is just general project management tool. We like to expose you to this, one, as an option to kind of help you get organized, but also to expose you to it because when you get into the workplace, you'll be using something like Jira, which is another tool that is owned by the same company that makes Trello. They actually bought Trello. Or you'll use Asana, or there are a couple other project management tools out there. And you may be using project management tools in whatever career you're currently in as well. But this notion of sprints and Kanbans and project management is something that you can figure out. Hey, do I already have a system in place for this? Do I already have a way of managing my tasks and making sure I get my homework done and making sure that, I'm reviewing things in class and all of that? Or you may be at a point where you're like, I've never really had to manage that many things at once, right? And at that point, you can decide if using something like Trello is a good idea for you, or you can go the serial killer route and have Post-its on your wall. That is totally fine. I have seen more companies, especially startups than you may think, who are all the team members are working on their own things. And because they're not communicating with each other, they're duplicating work efforts. And so I've seen a lot of startups with sticky notes on the wall, and they color code everyone for the person who's doing it. And the rule is that if you're working on something and it's not in the doing column, you get a slap on the wrist, right? Of like, no, you have to update the board so we know what you're working on. And that also benefits the team members so that when you move it to done, not only do your team members know, oh, now I can start on what you just finished, but they also, there's a psychological effect, right? Of when you're done a task, you don't want to just archive it and move on. You want to put it in that done column, because as important as it is to do sprint planning at the beginning of the week, right? The general notion of let me build out my to-do list and know what's coming down the pipeline. But there's the psychological impact of being able to go on Friday and go, look at all the things that I got done. I can't tell you how many days that I get to 5 o'clock, well, now 8:30, and I'm like, wow, that was a productive day. And then I go, I have no idea what I did today, right? That's not a good feeling. You're like, I know I did a lot of work, but I did so many little things, I can't remember what they are. And so I'm in the habit of always having a notebook next to me when I'm at my computer. And whenever something pops up, whenever I have to do something, I write it down before I do it. Because now, just like rubber ducking, I have thought through the task, I physically written it down. And when my boss goes, hey, what'd you do this week? I can go to my notebook and see all the things that I've crossed out and said, hey, this is what I've accomplished, right? When you're working in a team environment, an electronic project management tool, no matter what one you pick, is definitely more important. But when you're working on your own, when you're doing your own project management, you don't really need to use a digital tool. If a digital tool like this will help you, by all means, go use it. But if you are someone who works well out of Post-it notes or a notebook or whatever system you have in place, whether you live in a calendar, that's totally fine. But we like to expose you to it both from the workforce perspective and from the building a new system and exposing you to tools as early as we can in the cohort, because Trello may be something that you're like, nah, I don't need this. And 3 weeks from now, you're going to be meeting with your mentor and you're going to be like, oh my God, when did we start moving so quick? I have so many things I got to do. And that's a great thing for your mentor to kind of sit down with you and go, well, here's how I use project management. What project management are you using right now? And let's help you stay organized throughout all of that.
Okay, so let's say in the workplace,
Yep.
see how you gotta modify homework assignment.
Yes.
So what if like one day you like, well, I got something to do, I gotta find like all my rubber ducks, and so will you be able to assign that to somebody else?
Yeah.
Or-
So I can go in here, and the cool thing about this is there's an entire comment section. So I can comment on this and say like, at Caitlin, I'm swamped right now. This is on you. This is on. Oh, need more coffee, apparently. So I can hit save there, and she would get a notification in her inbox that says, hey, you've got a new comment. But then what I can also do is go up to the members here, and I can remove myself from this and put Caitlin on it. Or I can say, I need to follow up on this once Caitlin is done with it. So I'm going to assign Caitlin to it, but also leave myself on it. And that way you can have multiple members on a card as well, because sometimes multiple people are responsible for getting a task done. So Trello is very flexible in being able to do that. Yeah. Any other questions? We use we don't use Trello for admissions. I think we may have in an earlier cohort, but we do use Kanban, right? So our Kanban for admissions, I won't pull it up for privacy reasons because it has all the applicants in it right now. But we have all of the stages of, all right, did you submit your written application? Once your written application was submitted, someone had to review it, make sure you met the eligibility requirements. Once you met the eligibility requirements, that moved you into another column. From there, it was, did they complete the Willow interview? When they completed the Willow interview, it says, have they completed the tech assessment? When they completed the tech assessment, we moved you into, are they ready for review, right? Have someone gone through and said, all right, all of the pieces are in here. Once you were in final review, you got moved into approved or rejected, right? Obviously, all of you guys are in the approved column. But we use that same Kanban principle because sometimes we've had 300 applicants, right? And keeping track of 300 people isn't really great to do in a spreadsheet. How do I know? Because we've done it, right? We've had all the tabs open. We've gone, what's their technical score? We got to pull that in. How did they do in Willow? What was that score? That's another tab we got to go check. Our application process used to be like 9 different windows, and we would all have to go through them at the final application review. And it took hours because we had so many separate systems. So what Max Gerlach did an amazing job of this cohort was saying, well, we really like Willow, we really like Google Forms for the technical assessment, but we still need to be able to keep track of all of these people. So we use a software called Pipify that also uses Kanban that let us not only set up all of those phases, but automate it so that when you filled out the form, you would automatically be moved into the next phase. And by the time you got into applicant review, we could literally open up your card and see your technical assessment score, your written application, and your Willow, a link to review your Willow responses. So software like that exists, and multiple pieces of software will use Kanban in different ways.
How automated was it? Were all the results just automatically sent, or was there still somebody in the background?
The only manual step was reviewing your eligibility, like the income in your written application. Everything else was automated. So the second we said eligibility approved, you got the email. We didn't send an email. And once you filled out the Willow, you notice right after you fill out the Willow, you got the tech assessment email. All of that was all automated through Pipify and Zapier. And most of it was a no-code solution, which is kind of cool. So there was very little code written for that. I take the opposite approach of Max G, and I'll be doing something and I'm like, this is dumb. Just give me the code and I'll write the code. But that's also because I've got a little bit more experience in the code side of things. So you'll notice the YouTube video gets posted to YouTube automatically. That's because I was tired at 8:30 and then the video would take 2 hours to process. And then students would be like, well, I'd really love to watch it tonight. I'm a night owl. And I'm like, all right, I'll stay up another 2 hours and like go upload it to YouTube. And then I'm like, I'm a developer, damn it, I can automate this, you know? So we do that. And it's really cool once you get to that point as a developer, because we have for the mentor spreadsheet, we have an entire compliance section. And I actually just did this for attendance last night. When you fill out the attendance form, I didn't want to have to go through 20 form submissions and then make a spreadsheet that would automatically figure out the date and who submitted it. And so I wrote code last night that basically went in Google Sheets, ran some JavaScript, detected the date format, cut off the time, validated the secret word, and then put a check mark in an actual table format. So instead of all of them being form submissions, it's now a grid of the date and all of your names. So really cool stuff that you can do with data. And of course, data analysis is an entire career field, but so is data cleanup, right? When you get data in dirty formats or formats where it's like, yeah, this is great. We have 1,000 people who filled out this attendance form, but I still don't know how much this one person is attending class or if they were absent. And so coding allows you to unlock that, not just at the spreadsheet level, but also down at the database level and at the integration level. Yeah.
Data engineering. And
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep.
So how would you change the background for someone? Like how you got the creative code?
If you go to the menu, oh, there it is. You go to menu here and then it's in change background. And I will say that I know we're on the paid version of Trello, so there may be some features that aren't available on the free tier. But I think that gets into more of the collaboration side than the feature side. So most of the things that you're seeing here are probably accessible in the free tier.
How many applicants did you get?
I want to say around 70. Don't quote me on that. Normally we have admissions open a little longer, but because we got the automation right the first time, that kind of pushed out our when we opened applications. Because nothing is worse than when an automation goes wrong and all of a sudden you're getting an accepted email when we didn't actually mean to send them, or you're getting told to do something that you've already completed, or that that gets a little hairy. So we thoroughly tested through quality assurance and made sure that everything worked. Included me sitting down and going through the technical assessment and going, I don't even know the answer to this. Why are we asking this question? I don't know. So believe it or not, even though the technical assessment is long, we actually shaved about 20 questions off of it this time around, because there were some questions where I'm just like, bad question, off the list. Cool. Any other questions? Okay. Let me see what else is on the outline. We will get into the car exercise in Figma when you get back. Everyone is going to activate their Figma account. Figma is paid software. However, because we are a registered school with them, you get a free license to use for the entire cohort. And it may even be for a year or two. I can't remember. Figma is a really cool application. We're going to learn how to do some wireframing in that. And then we're going to break you out into teams. We're going to break you out into teams and start working on the different sections of that car project. Couple things to call out before we break out. I have a couple things linked in here. I am going to just basically show you the possibilities in Figma. However, Figma is something that you can literally spend hours learning. It is not something that is like point and click software. It is really meant for professional UI designers. So I have two things linked in here. One is a really good video on intro to Figma. If you are like leaning into UI design, if you're having fun doing visual design, I highly recommend you watch that. And then there is an entire Figma course here. It does take about 2 hours to go through. It will probably take you a little longer because you're going to want to pause the video and go play around with what they're teaching you. But those are some really good ideas there. I thought I had... yeah, so there is also an article here from Sketch. So here, let me try and not jump around a little bit. There are a ton of different tools available to you, not just Figma. Figma is the one that I'm going to show you in person, but Sketch is probably the biggest competitor to Figma. Miro is really popular now. That's kind of like a digital whiteboarding app that's used for being able to collaborate virtually, but still have that visual experience. Canva is a really big design software. And then even things like Adobe Photoshop, Illustrator, and PowerPoint, right? I can't tell you how many people will do their prototypes or mock-ups in PowerPoint, right? Where they just draw rectangles and they type in their text. It's a little old school. It's not really built for that. However, I've seen entire startups be built in, hey, we have this app idea, here's how it would work, and they build it all in PowerPoint, and they actually have links that go to different slides. So when they're in slide mode, they can click on it and it jumps them to another screen in the app. And it is really a great way to go like, oh, I understand the app that you're trying to build, right? So even though that I'm showing you Figma, I want to let you guys know that that is a very powerful tool and that you don't necessarily have to commit to using it today, right? So I want you to play around with it in your different groups, but it won't be a requirement for you to do a deep dive on it. Okay, so you've kind of heard me say mock-up, prototype, wireframe. What's really the difference there? Well, that's an evolution. And there are some designers who will jump right into a mock-up and go, I've got it in my head. I know what I want to do. But a basic wireframe is going to look like this. It is black and white. The only content that shows there is going to be like a label so that you've got a general idea. And all of the images are going to be placeholders. There's no color to it. You haven't really figured out what the buttons are going to look like, but you know that it's going to be a button there. The basic tab structure or nav bars or menus may be built into the wireframe, but the idea here is that the wireframe is all about layout. It's not about design. And the industry mostly agrees on the difference between a wireframe, a mock-up, and a prototype. But if take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, because I don't actually think that this is a very good wireframe. I like wireframes to have a little bit more content in them. So they don't necessarily need to have the entire description, right? But I like the buttons or the placeholder images to have a little description of what's going to be there, right? I don't like to use placeholder text. If I'm going to put a button in a wireframe, I'm going to put the label of what's going to go on that button, right? That's not a requirement of a wireframe, but I find that that's what makes a wireframe more useful. Now, at any step of this process, you could take this to your client or to your whoever your deliverable is going to, right? And say, hey, can I get some feedback on this? Because they may come back and go, I hate this layout. No, I don't want there to be a profile image there. Profile images are a security violation, and we can't have profile images anywhere. Well, now you don't have to spend all of this time designing a profile image. You can just go, oh, that's not a feature we need. We can remove that from the wireframe. The step after a wireframe is a mock-up. And so you can see here, this is where it starts to get a little bit more real, right? This is where we start putting in not just placeholders, but we start putting in the images. We start thinking about, oh, is this going to be on a black background with white text or a white background with black text, right? This is where we start thinking about, well, what are our buttons going to look like? How big is our text going to be? What icons are going to show up on the tab bar, right? The mock-up is going to be, all right, if I handed this to a developer and they came back with an app that looked just like my mock-up, I would be happy. So the mock-up is where we start adding in more of the content, more of the design aspect of things. Okay, well, if we have a mock-up, what could possibly be after a mock-up? That's the prototype. And I don't even know, oh, they do have a decent image. So a prototype is basically, if you've ever done links in PowerPoint or Google Slide or anything, where you can actually click on the button and it will take you to another section of the app or the slideshow. That's what prototyping is. So prototyping may allow you to actually scroll on your phone, right? It may actually make it so that when you click the menu button, a menu slides out. But a prototype is not written in any code, right? A prototype is still done entirely in the visual app, whether that's Figma or Sketch or InVision is the biggest, or it used to be one of the biggest prototyping tools. It is meant to say, hey, I can hand my phone over to someone in prototype mode, and without me having to write any code, they can kind of get a feel for the app, right? They can click on different things, they can see what the different screens are, but it's not going to have any real data, right? They may be able to click into a form field and type something in, but when they hit the save button, it's just going to reset back to the previous screen. It isn't actually saving the data anywhere. It's not making API calls. It's not connected to a database. There's no actual front end. The general idea here is, hey, let's give you something that you can sign off on and say, this is how I want it to work, before we dive into the coding aspect and do everything in the front end. Well, why do we need to do any of this? Why don't we just start coding? Because anything in Figma or Sketch or whatever prototyping or mockup or wireframe tool that you use is always going to be easier to adjust here than it's going to be able to adjust in your code, because they may come back to you, and I am not joking you, I have heard this said to me, that blue looks a little too blue, doesn't it? And I'm like, what does that mean? What does too blue mean? Do you want a lighter blue? Do you want a darker blue? Is there too much blue in the interface and you would like different colors? I don't know. It just looks pretty blue to me. Right? So you got to work with the client on that. And in Sketch or Figma, you're able to go, oh, you just don't like that color blue. You want a light blue. No problem. I can change that in one spot, and all the different places that I use that light blue will now update and automatically use that color everywhere. But in my code, I may have that blue set up in 15 different places. That may be the background color, that may be a font color, that may be a border on an image. I may have to adjust that in 10 different places in my code, but if we caught that in Sketch or Figma in the mockup phase, we would be able to fix that more easily, so that when we did get to the code phase, we wouldn't have to spend so much time on modifications. Modifications are definitely unavoidable when we are in the code phase, but the more we can do visually before we jump into that, the more time we'll save when we are coding. So keep all of this in the back of your mind, and for the second half of class, because in a couple of weeks, we are going to ask you to submit a wireframe of your capstone. Don't worry, we're going to go over the capstone project. We're going to cover all the requirements. We're going to talk about how you can come up with a project idea. That's all coming down the road. But all of this knowledge that you're gaining tonight, you're going to use in a couple weeks on a homework assignment. Now, the good news is that homework assignment, you do not need to use Figma. Some people get out of tonight's class and they're like, I would be happy if I never had to use Figma again in my life, and that is okay. But you will have to come up with a wireframe. And so that wireframe can be on a whiteboard that you have at home that you just take pictures of. That can be in loose paper that you just draw out and kind of get an idea there. You can use Figma. You can say, I don't really like Figma, but I like the idea of a digital tool. I'm going to go check out Sketch or some other software that I listed on the outline. You can, however it works for you, that is totally fine. But we like to introduce that to you because some designers will like interchangeably be like, oh yeah, I'll get you a mock-up. And then they hand you a black and white thing and you're like, this isn't really a mock-up, this is a wireframe. But as long as that wireframe has an idea of the content and the layout, that can still be very helpful. So because I've been doing this for so long, I don't skip the wireframe step. I wireframe it, but then I don't mock it up, right? Because for me, I know my boss isn't picky on the visual design of things. I know that the components that I'm using have already been used in another part of the app. And so I don't mock up. I just do the wireframe. I make sure that the content is there. I send that to my boss. He okays it. And then I jump right into the coding phase. However, if I'm working for a client that isn't my boss, right? If we have a client that we're doing a deliverable for together, I go through all three of these phases and I will do the wireframe and send it to my boss and go, did I forget anything? But I won't send that to the client because the client's going to be like, what's this crap? This looks nothing like an app, right? But I'm going to go through the time on the mockup because I want to make sure that the client isn't going to come back and go, that blue is too blue, right? I want them to see all of the steps and phases of that. And then I'm going to prototype, because once you learn these prototyping tools, it's really cool to be able to send a link to your client and say, go play with this. Right? I don't have to share my screen and walk you through every step. I can just send you a link and not have to sit in a meeting with you, and you can play around with it, figure out how you like the feel of the app, make sure that the order of the screens is right, make sure you like all of that. And there is something really different between getting sent a PDF of the mockup and actually being able to click on things, right? And kind of get the app flow feel. So those are the three design aspects. As a developer, you may not be responsible for any of these. Any good developer will tell you that there are better designers than there are developers. And you may get to the end of the program and go, you know what, I'm a better designer than I am a developer. And that's okay. There are plenty of jobs for you out there. But knowing these three steps can be really helpful.
So in a way, the way to think about it is the wireframe is like, let's say you drawing like an art, so it's kind of like rough sketching, and then
Yeah.
you get to mock up, it's
Yeah.
more cleaning up the lines and
Yeah.
prototyping, added detail.
Yeah, so you can think about it as the prototype is drawing the lines, the mock-up is adding the color, and then the prototype is making the art interactive. I don't know how you make a drawing interactive, but the idea is maybe the little paper things that make it slide back in. All right, before you go on break, head over to Canvas, please. Head into the modules, pop open the attendance form, and the secret word tonight is Figma, Figma. Once you have submitted the attendance form, go on break, be back at 7:25.
Mike, you might get two for me because they autocorrected the Sigma instead of Figma.
It's fine.
I'm just letting you know, like ahead of time. Yeah.
Would you
That's what I
happen
did.
to bring the computer? Thank you.
There you go. Okay, it's going. To go, all right, what did he just do? Let me go and try and do that myself, right? And so we're going to start with getting your Figma accounts created, just so that you can all access them. In order to do that, you are going to head into Canvas, head to modules, go to the C6 daily outlines. You can use the navigation on the left here. That's the little menu icon to jump down to day 3. Once you are in day 3, you are going to scroll down and it says car exercise in Figma. And it says use invite link for education license. Go ahead and click on that link. And from here, hopefully this should be pretty self-explanatory.
Not signed in, it says CICC 5.
That is fine.
Yeah. Whoops, right?
Oops. Yeah, it should be fine. It's not a big deal. I didn't even realize I had to update that. If it does ask you to verify your account, go ahead and do that. And then for the form questions, it's going to be like, why do you want to use Figma? Or, who told you about Figma? And you can just type in like, I'm a bootcamp student, and hit submit on that. I'm pretty sure they'll let you use your account for a couple days. And then if you don't verify it, they'll lock you out of the education side of things. So if you see that prompt, definitely go through those verify steps. You don't need a like at HackUpstate or at Careers and Code email. You can use whatever account you would like as long as you create an account using the invite link, not by going to figma.com. That's a good question. It does. Okay. While you guys are working on that, I am going to sign in myself. You refresh your screen, you'll notice that you're magically now in cohort 6.
Yeah, mine did too. I just looked back at it.
So that's the magic of sockets, which is basically APIs are this like one-way thing, right? Where when we want data from the API, we go out and we ask the API for the data and it returns it, and then that's it. That's the way the internet has traditionally always worked. So if a server has had more information that it would like to send us, it's like too bad. So when you're building a messaging app, historically, you would have to on your app say, hey server, are there any new messages? Wait 5 seconds. Hey server, are there any new messages? Wait 5 seconds. The internet is kind of built for a 1, 2, 3 process, right? 1, I ask for the information. 2, the server gets the information. 3, I get the information back from the server, and that is it. If I want to get more information, I have to repeat that process. However, in the past 10 years or so, we've gotten more into socket technology, which is basically saying, hey, server, I'm connected to you. You can now send me information as whenever you want, as long as you're still connected. So we don't go too much into sockets because they are still a newer technology and most of your capstones can be built not requiring them. But anyway, whenever you see something live refresh, now you know that it's actually using sockets under the hood.
Is this all just like a segue in the APIs, the whole C5, C6?
I wish you got a couple weeks to go until you get to APIs. You got to get through your midterm project is actually APIs to give you an idea of timing. Okay, so I am going to start a new project here. You guys don't have to follow along with me if you don't want to, but I'm going to call this car project. And then a really important thing to note that we learned last cohort, big jams are kind of cool because that's closer to what Miro does. It's like a virtual whiteboard. It's I don't want to say it has less features, but it's for a different use case, right? Fig jams are more for like, I want to have brainstorming. I want to do some kind of collage. I want to do a mind map. I want to collaborate on these generic ideas with people. That's what Fig Jam is for. I don't recommend Fig Jam if you're doing UI design. What you want is the design file, right? Which makes sense, but I didn't specify that last cohort, and I saw people had Fig Jams, and I'm like, oh, there are a lot of missing features here. They're missing because it's kind of meant for more collaboration side of things. The design file is an entire different like app basically within Figma that is specifically designed for UI design. So if you want to play around with FigJam boards, that's totally fine. But in general, if you are doing UI work, you want a design file. So I'm going to go ahead and create that. And now I'm into Figma. And you're looking at this and you're like, I have no idea what's going on here, right? And this is where you get into that 25-minute video or the 2-hour course in how to use all the different features in Figma. But I'm going to start up here with this rectangle. And that is going to let me create a frame. And so whenever we think about UI design, we're thinking about rectangles, right? We're thinking about what is this going to look like? This is going to be basically the landscape layout of the car. Okay, from here, we go, all right, we've got all of those requirements, right? So we got to think through where do we even start with this? This white rectangle is kind of imposing, right? So we think about this and we're like, all right, well, we've got different teams, right? We know we've got the music team. We know we've got the always on team. We know we've got the nav team. How are we going to work through this? Does anyone have ideas of where to start? So navigation is a good one, but I like to even start more abstract than that. What I like to do, pull out my phone. So I'm going to look at my phone and I'm going to go, all right, after I get past the lock screen, which we don't really need for a car, what do I see? Well, I see all my apps, right? And don't give me, I'm on Android. I don't see that. I know there's a app launcher somewhere. All right, so I need some way to control what apps are on the screen. Now, yeah, I'm on a car, right? So we need that always on section, but we also need some way to control what kind of app we're in. And so now I'm looking at my phone and I'm like, all right, well, we do that with the app launcher. We have a bunch of icons. How do we do that on our Mac? So I'm going to think about my Mac and I'm going to go down to my app and I'm going to see the dock down at the bottom. And I'm like, all right, we also have icons there and that seems to work. And then I'm going to think about Windows and I'm going to go, all right, well, we've got a start button, but then even in the start button, we've got apps down at the bottom now in Windows 7 and on. Yeah.
Say sometimes, like, especially when you get like really cold, any device that already have like the main core apps at the bottom.
Yes. Yep. And that just happened on your Mac. That happens, right? That happens everywhere. So we're looking at this and we're like, all right, we are not the first UI designers, right? We are not trying to reinvent the wheel here. So instead of getting intimidated and being like, this is just a giant white area, let's say, all right, well, we've got icons on our phone. We've got icons at the bottom of the screen on our Mac, and we've got icons on the bottom of the screen in Windows, right? So if all of those are doing that, I don't know. I think icons at the bottom of the screen kind of make sense for our car. So that's where I'm going to get started. I'm going to start with a text object here. So I'm going to click on that. I'm going to draw a little text box. I get a cursor. And I'm going to cheat here because as a designer, designers get into their icons, they get really fancy with it, but we've got an hour to get through this, right? So I'm like, all right, how am I going to cheat on this? I could go out on the internet and find a music icon and copy it and paste it in here, but then you get into copyright, right? It's not really legal to just go take someone else's work off the internet. Well, there are copyright websites that we'll expose you to later on in the cohort, but one of my favorite tricks is all emojis are text. So what we can do is use emojis as our icons, maybe for wireframing, right? When we got into mockups, when we're actually making the design, we may want to use another icon set and get into licensing and all of that kind of stuff. But for now, I'm going to use an emoji to get the job done quick and dirty. So I'm going to hit Control Command Space, and that is going to pop open my emoji picker. And I use music as an example. So I'm going to say, all right, we're going to start with our music. And I'm going to drop that in there and I'm going to go, all right, that looks a little small for me. So I can highlight that, scroll down on the right side here and increase that text size to like 20. Okay. So we said music. That's good. Now we also need to think about what are our other apps. So I can highlight this text box. I'm going to resize it so it's just a little bit more of the shape. I'm going to copy it, Command C, click where I want it to go, Command V, and drag it over so we got another icon, right? Double click on that. I know I'm going fast here, but that's kind of Figma, as you figure it out as you go, right? I'm sure all of you have used some kind of design software or PowerPoint software. This is just a little bit more design oriented. So we'll grab a phone. We will say we get our maps. We said we needed settings. Okay, and now I'm going to go, all right, we need climate, right? I'm going to throw a fan on there. And then I'm like, but we also said climate needed to talk to the always on team, right? Because climate has a ton of different controls that you should be able to get to, but what's probably the most important thing about climate? What's the thing I'm going to adjust the most? The temperature. So instead of just putting a fan on here and going, oh, we'll let the climate team figure it out, I'm going to do some work for the always on team, because instead of clicking on the climate and then adjusting it, why don't I just put 72 down in the bottom? And when you click on 72, that's what launches you into climate. So I'm going to do that. And I'm going to say, you know what? If we said climate's the most important, so I'm going to type in 72, I'm going to get my degrees Fahrenheit and drop that in. And then I'm going to go, yeah, but you know what? If I'm saying that's the most important number, it's also probably going to be the thing that I want to adjust the most, right? So what if we have a little shortcut in there that would let them adjust it right from the 72 number? And then if they wanted to get more climate information, they can tap on the 72. So I can do that really easily by just throwing in a less than and a greater than. Is that super pretty? No, but it conveys the point for our wireframe. Okay, so we've got that, and now we can go, all right, that's looking good. We can always highlight multiple things here and rearrange these. And Figma has all kinds of tools for making sure that it's snap-centered and all of that good stuff. But that gives us a good starting point. Now, I'm thinking about, what did we say with that always on team? We needed to show things like the speedometer. There were things that we wanted to show like the time, but we don't want to say, we don't want to just have the maps team design in this entire area right above the top toolbar if the always on team needs an area to design, right? So we kind of want to carve out architecturally what's going on. And we can solve that with one little detail. We said, hey, only 2 apps can be running at the same time. Well, what if one of those apps is an area for the always on team? So that's what we're going to do. We're going to come in, grab our rectangle tool and change it to a line tool. I'm then going to draw a line down, I don't know, about 1/4 of the screen. And if I hold the shift button, it's going to make it a straight line. And I'm going to say, all right, now the always on team gets to the left side of that. They get to control where the speed goes. They get to figure out what the alerts are going to be. That's the always on team's job. We don't, all 20 of us need to agree on what's going to go in there. We want to break up into teams, but we want to make sure that all of the teams know you're limited to that space on the right, unless you get clever. And I will leave that up to you to figure out if you would like to get clever and how to get clever. So I am going to do 2 more lines here. I'm going to do a line across so that we know, hey, this is the bottom bar. No one gets to touch that area because those are all the different apps that we agreed upon. And we're also going to carve out just a tiny little bit of space for the always on team across the top. And they get to decide what's going to go in that space. And yes, I am OCD about that. Okay. Now I'm looking at this and I'm like, yeah, this looks like a bunch of lines, but are we already getting gears starting to turn on what we could put in there, right? So I think it is only fair to randomly assign you to a team, unless you guys have a strong preference or want to work together. This is, I will say, the only group project that I stick on you guys. I hated group projects in my classes. I do think this is a good collaboration exercise. So I promise this is the only group exercise I will require you guys to do. Any objections to random? Okay, give me 2 minutes. All right, we said always on. Oh, I forgot settings. Okay, so one last thing I want to show you guys is you've seen all of your cursors flying around in here. The first thing you're going to do is you're all going to attack this frame, and all of a sudden things are going to be showing up and cursors are going to be all over the place, and it's going to be a major mess, right? So what we are going to do is, if you go to the page here, I'm going to call this the main. One big thing in society right now is not calling anything master because of the connotations of it, which I'm fully on board with. I think that's a really good change to make. So if you ever have the opportunity, call something main instead of master. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create pages for you guys. So that will be nav and always on. And I'll create the rest in a second when you guys are sorting into your teams. Do not edit anything on main, right? But if you would like, you're going to get to a certain point where you go, hey, the nav team wants something more than just the first screen, right? They need some way to display the directions list or show the keyboard or whatever it is. So what you can do is you can click on this frame. If you double click on the name of it, you can name it. So you can say first screen, and then you can click on that, make sure it's selected in blue, copy it, paste it, and drag it down to where you want it. And so now you'll see that you've got two separate areas here where this one could become something like address input. Right, so that's the way that you can duplicate the whole thing. And of course, you can copy things from one frame and paste them down onto the other. But now over here on the left side, you will see that there are two separate frames for your basic screens. Does that make sense? Okay. You are welcome to break out and use the space. Design for the next until you know what? We'll say design until 8:30. You're welcome to head out. You do not need to work on this over the weekend. You do not need to keep adding onto this unless you're like, Figma's really fun. I want to keep playing with it. And then by all means, you are welcome to. Work on this. You are welcome to migrate out into that space, but you can kind of find each other. There will be a good opportunity to learn names. And then, by the way, I do think names are really important. I've just learned that they're much easier to learn through Zoom than they are in person. So I will get to learn all of your names starting on Monday, and we will go from there. So here are the team assignments. So find your fellow team members, kind of rearrange so that you are in groups together. Feel free to migrate out into that space and use the booths out there or the conference room in this back table. When 8:30 rolls around, you are welcome to peace out. But after you guys organize, which I recognize will take about 5 minutes, I will be floating around and helping you guys in Figma answer questions and get more comfortable there. You may figure out that you want one person driving, right? Like one person doing the Figma and other people contributing. You may decide that it makes more sense to break out by screen and say, all right, I'm going to do the address input screen. You're going to do the turn input screen, the turn by turn, the whatever. So go at it, kind of see where you're at. The good news is I don't have expectations that you get anything complete on this, but I do have expectations that you start to play around with Figma, start thinking through the requirements that is linked in the outline from yesterday, and start thinking through what that interface is going to look like. I will fix that and create the other frames. Yeah. So if someone wants to, from like the nav team wants to say, nav team, follow me outside. And then
Phones right here.
there's a list on the screen in case you forgot. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. I believe in home.
Mo isn't here today. Sorry, I didn't pull off attendance. Right when the room finally cools down, everyone leaves me. I'm making them right now. Me, settings. Thanks. Everyone should have edit access now. If you don't have edit access, let me know and I just missed you in the list. And you should also have your own pages as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, primary menu and then from there, diving below that, right? Yeah, I would just. Hello.
Hello.
I was trying to remember on the car project when I was trying to remember the command for trying to search.
Command F.
Command F.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So that way then the car project
I-
car requirements.
I will sort that also so that it's all by the requirements.
So it's command F.
Command F, but now it's sorted for you so that it's at least grouped.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Music phone. Oh,
There we go. All right, so.
we ended up with some duplicates, so make sure that you're on the page that is already created. I don't know if the music team is in here or not. Always nav climate settings. Main. One, two, three, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. The car requirements list I did just sort, so it should be easier to go through that spreadsheet if you have it open.